If you grew up in the 90s or 2000s, chances are you remember that spine-tingling moment when legends walked down the ramp. The Undertaker, The Rock, Kane, Triple H, and countless others. These men weren't just wrestlers. They were modern-day titans, larger-than-life warriors who felt untouchable. Every single performer, whether they were headlining WrestleMania or opening the show, carried an aura that separated them from ordinary people. Stone Cold and looked like the kind of guy who'd beat you bloody in a parking lot. Kane looked like he might set you on fire just for glancing at him. Brock Lesnar, Batista, even Kurt Angle radiated a raw, almost superhuman intensity that made you believe these weren't just athletes. They were living, breathing comic book characters. But when you watch WWE today, that aura feels like it's disappeared. Aside from rare exceptions like Roman Reigns, most of the roster no longer carries that mystique, that larger-than-life presence, that feeling that these men and women were something more than just performers. Instead, they often look like regular people in wrestling gear, playing characters rather than living them. So what happened? Why does modern WWE feel so different from the product that once gave us gods among mortals? After nearly 3 decades of watching wrestling evolve, I can tell you this didn't happen by accident. It was systematic, it was deliberate, and it stripped away everything that made pro wrestlers feel mythical. There are 3 major reasons why WWE superstars no longer look or feel cool. Let's start with the most obvious. Back in the 80s, 90s, and even into the early 2000s, steroids played a massive role in giving wrestlers that superhuman look. Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, Triple H, Batista. Their bodies looked like they were carved straight out of a Marvel comic book. Even mid-carders were pressured to bulk up, because looking like a regular guy simply wasn't an option. These weren't physiques you saw in everyday life. And that was the point. Wrestlers were meant to look impossible. But the illusion came crashing down after the steroid scandals of the early 90s. Vince McMahon himself went to trial. The company's image took a beating, and although steroid use didn't vanish overnight, it became less brazen. Then came the tragedies of Eddie Guerrero in 2005 and Chris Benoit in 2007, both of which forced WWE to finally take its wellness policy seriously. Strict testing became the norm. Suddenly, the era of hulking monsters was over. The new generation of stars were leaner, more athletic, more conditioned, but also far less intimidating. Seth Rollins, CM Punk, the Usos, they look like athletes, even CrossFit trainers. Not warriors or mythical beasts, and while there are still exceptions like LA Knight or Randy Orton, the days when almost every wrestler looked like a demigod are long gone. But here's the truth. The loss of those physiques is only a fraction of the problem. The real killers of wrestling's mystique were far more insidious. When we were kids, we didn't just believe in The Undertaker. We knew he was the dead man. We whispered stories that he lived in cemeteries, that he slept in coffins, that Paul Bearer was his real-life mortician. When his eyes rolled back and the lights went out, it genuinely felt like something supernatural was happening. Why? Because kayfabe was sacred. Wrestlers lived their characters. You didn't see The Rock and Stone Cold hanging out at Starbucks. You didn't see Kane breaking character on TikTok. You didn't see John Cena laughing backstage with Edge while they were supposedly tearing each other's lives apart. Today, that discipline is gone. Wrestlers broadcast their lives on social media. They go on podcasts openly discussing storylines before they even happen. Shows like WWE, Unreal on Netflix pull back the curtain, revealing how matches are planned, finishes are scripted, and feuds are manufactured. It's like watching a magician explain every trick while he's still on stage. The magic dies instantly. And while living your gimmick 24/7 may have been unsustainable in the past, completely abandoning it destroys the mystique. Modern wrestlers treat their characters like Halloween costumes they wear for a few hours, instead of identities they inhabit. And when the illusion breaks, the aura vanishes. Think back to the moments that defined WWE at its peak. Not just the matches, but the stories that made your heart race. Remember when Randy Orton handcuffed Triple H to the ropes, forcing him to watch helplessly as Orton kissed Stephanie McMahon right in front of him? That wasn't just wrestling. That was theater. It was rage, humiliation, and revenge, wrapped into one unforgettable scene. And it didn't stop there. Triple H literally broke into Orton's home, turning their rivalry into something that felt dangerous and personal. Or think about Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio battling for the custody of Dominik. On paper it was outrageous, but the way those two legends sold it made fans suspend disbelief. We weren't just watching a match, we were watching a man fight for his family, for his very bloodline. Those stories matter because they were rooted in something every human can understand. Love, betrayal, pride, desperation. The wrestling match was just the climax of a much deeper narrative. Jeff Hardy's battles were never just about titles. They were about proving to himself that he could rise above his demons. Every victory felt like a step toward redemption. Shawn Michaels' final years weren't just about chasing championships. They were about chasing purpose, about proving he still belonged in a world that had seemingly moved on without him. And who can forget Stone Cold Steve Austin's war with Vince McMahon? That wasn't just a feud. That was the voice of every working-class fan who ever hated their boss, brought to life in the most explosive way possible. These stories elevated wrestlers beyond athletes. They became characters with depth, with flaws, with reasons to fight that went far beyond a belt or a ranking. That's why they stuck with you. You weren't just invested in the outcome of a match, you were invested in the person. Now compare that to today. Almost every storyline boils down to the same bland formula. I want to be the best. I want the title. That's it. No betrayal, no personal struggle, no stakes beyond bragging rights. Wrestlers cut promos about being the top guy or the face of the company, but it all feels interchangeable. You could swap one wrestler out for another and the story wouldn't change. There's no uniqueness, no emotional hook. And when you pair that shallow storytelling with the death of Kayfabe and the loss of those larger-than-life physiques, what you're left with is a roster of athletes who, while incredibly talented, feel ordinary. Technicians, not icons. Performers, not legends. They blend into each other instead of standing apart. The cruel irony is that WWE has never been more polished. The production values are through the roof. The entrances look like movie sets. The matches are more technically precise than ever before. But in chasing that polish, WWE lost the one thing that mattered most: soul. Because wrestling isn't just about what happens inside the ropes. It's about the story that drives you there. It's about the tension, the emotion, the unpredictability that makes you believe something bigger is at stake. The Attitude Era had chaos, drama, and characters you'd follow to hell and back. Today's product often feels like a collection of technically sound matches, with no heart, no bite, no real reason to care. And the saddest part? Many fans have accepted it. They've been conditioned to believe this is just wrestling evolving, that this is a more mature, more realistic product. But maturity without emotion is just emptiness. A technically perfect match without a meaningful story is just noise. Wrestling was never supposed to be about being realistic or corporate. It was about making you believe in superheroes and villains, about making you care so deeply that you'd scream at your TV, throw your hands in the air, or even shed tears for someone you'd never met in real life. That's the magic WWE once had, and what it slowly let die. Today, WWE doesn't create legends. It doesn't create memories that last forever. It creates content. Content to fill hours, to check boxes, to keep the machine running. But content doesn't inspire. Content doesn't burn itself into your memory. And until WWE remembers that wrestling is about stories, not matches, we'll keep getting a product that looks polished on the outside, but hollow at its core.